Welcome back to Tez Talks. Today I'm joined by Kevin Mehrabi, founder of Stabletech, longtime Tezos builder, and host of Tezcast. Kevin's been part of this community since before mainnet, and over the years he's launched projects like USDtz, Tezfin, and Tezex. He's also been leading Tezos Los Angeles since 2018, building local connections while pushing DeFi forward on chain. We'll get into stablecoins, the new Genius Act, and what all this means for Tezos DeFi. Kevin, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. You listed a lot of things, but I need to have a new Tezcast episode. I haven't done that in a long time. And Tezos LA, we should have a local event. It's been a long hiatus from that. But yeah, DeFi has been what I do. That is the job. That's my career. But really all the other stuff I do, it's in the Tezos world. So from hosting spaces, and those are all the Tezos extracurriculars. But it's all integrated. It's all part of the Tezos economy. So when you're in the Tezos universe, you end up touching everywhere.
So let's start at the beginning. Your first impression and some lighter personal takes. Now, you've been with Tezos since before mainnet. If you could sum up your first impression of the community back in 2017 in one word, what would it be?
Fundraiser. 2017 was all about the fundraiser. 2018 is when I feel the community really became, before mainnet even, when I think some people who maybe they don't tune into Tezos, they hear whatever the biggest headlines are. They maybe remember because Tezos was the biggest crowd sale of 2017, it was kind of the face of those, all those, or not crowd sale, fundraiser, but all those types of projects that were going on at the time. And of course, like pushbacks that were associated with it. I think people don't remember how the resolution of that whole event ended up in something really underscoring the decentralization of the Tezos community and how the people really run it. That the community was not happy with who was the first head of the foundation at the time. So they rallied together, elected their own sort of rival foundation with their own president out of just forums or chats and everything. And that's how Ryan Jesperson, I remember how he became the president of that. And then the very next day, that president of the Tezos Foundation resigned, and the Ryan Jesperson became president of Tezos Foundation. And so not only did all of that last, just that whole event was just 3 weeks, even though people still talk about it, and we had a really great resolution from it. And it was almost like a revolution that happened at that time, but it underscored all of our Tezos values of decentralization and shows how this is not something that could ever be a top-down community. It's always going to be from the bottom up, from the beginning through now. And since then, with on-chain governance, which was really the point of all this stuff, we've shown that again and again, how contention can be a healthy thing. And as long as it's channeled the right way, and it can lead to outcomes that are better than if the resolution were met at the very beginning, that in the process, in the climb, we get somewhere even stronger. And I think you can see that in many different events in Tezos, from art to DeFi and all of it.
So in your estimation, do you feel like that decentralization has really kind of held up over time?
Yeah, and gotten stronger, definitely. And you might even hear people complaining the opposite, which is a good thing, because that doesn't mean that it's the opposite. It means that Tezos people hold decentralization to a high standard, to the highest standard of any community in all of blockchain. So no matter how decentralized we are, there will be, always be, and should be people who are complaining and saying it's not enough, let's keep going forward. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that you only grow decentralization and you make things more decentralized and strengthen decentralization when people are just not happy enough with it. So it's a good thing. That's a healthy contention.
No, was there a moment where you knew you'd be here long term?
Yes. Before Tezos, and I didn't, before 2018, I thought I was part of I did a fundraiser, I participated in that, but I was looking overall at just all these different blockchains, looking at it's all open source, and these technologies are very new. You're going to have a lot of contentious hard forks, and then those communities get usurped by other forks of those. And plus, and like blockchain protocols and code cannibalizing the stuff that came before it. So to me, the idea of getting behind any one ecosystem like was just ridiculous. Like it was just not smart to do. It was a very unwise thing to do. That my idea was what I think many people default to when they first come to blockchain, or most people just default to in general, and venture capitalists as well, more than anyone, and understandably why, for a financial way, which is to hedge your bets. Just everywhere, look at everything, be a part of it. And that there is some health to that, but there's definitely a trade-off in that you don't get the benefit of any expertise in any one. Jack of all trades, master of none, but still better than master of one. Sure. But like, and when it comes to these technologies that are so, tumultuous and whatnot, you want to be able to, at least at first, kind of get your mind around something. So I knew I wanted to do finance on blockchain. DeFi wasn't a term yet that I had come to be. So it was still like 2018 time. And it was when I really read the Tezos white paper. Like I understood stuff, but like I wanted to just like go word by word and really get through it. And I realized it resolved all the issues I had with any one blockchain, and also prevented the risks that I felt would be the case if I followed any other blockchain, any ecosystem. Because it was like, well, okay, yeah, I know there will be a lot of things that will be around in the future, and stuff will not be around and new stuff will be there. But I know Tezos will be there because of the way that it's governed, because they figured it out with on-chain governance. They figured out to take what are these democratizing aspects, which are the most evolved form of social and territorial governance we came up with in human society, and figured out how to do it on a blockchain so that it can live forever, governed by the people. And also, not only that, but having a mechanism to course correct, to improve the process itself. To me, that's like, okay, that's the recipe. They figured it out, and no one else was doing this. So to me, it represented a kind of design that was just thinking many years ahead, on a whole other level than any other ecosystem. And also for finance, like they need this more than anything else. When it comes to having that system of like where you stay unified and not having the risk, just the risk of a contentious hard fork, you need that for financial assets. You can't tokenize trillions of dollars on blockchain and then think, oh, well, the validators didn't agree and then the developers didn't, so there's this contentious hard fork. It's like, oh, well, which one's the real one? Well, technically they both are. They both come from the same place. Like, no, but which one's the real one? Like, no, technically, in any practical sense, they both are. Usually people just kind of gravitate towards a majority, but that's not always clear either. Sometimes it flips. And it's like, well, then what happens to the assets you've tokenized? Does everyone own half of it? Like, because the assets do get split in. There are people who are still selling like proof of work chain Bored Apes on Ethereum, saying, well, technically those are the original Bored Apes, and what you're seeing is on what the Ethereum of the mainstream is the fork. But some things are resolved more easily than others, but the risk gets margins lower than where they need to be for finance, and it's just not worth it. Also, when it comes to just innovation, future-proofing our technologies, what is the best technology? In the long run, you want the thing that is designed for on-chain governance, the thing that brings in ideas and contributions from all over the world, not from a founder or from a team, but from everybody coming in. That's where you really capitalize off of the collective intelligence of humanity, because it doesn't matter how wise a individual founder or team is and how great they contribute stuff, and they can do great things. It's limited. It's ultimately limited in what they can bring in. And so they need the collective. They need that contribution from the outside. So ultimately, we get better and better. So yeah, and we've already seen, I think, us leapfrog other blockchains in many ways, and those dividends will continue to pay off as we go forward with more and more on-chain governance upgrades.
Now, you recently posted about a time-traveling hipster photo. If you could time travel to any moment in crypto history, just to observe, where would you land?
Oh, well, I'd have to say the first mining operation of Bitcoin, where it all began, or the first transaction between, we'll say, the founder, that's unknown, and Hal Finney. I believe it's Nick Szabo. I think there are a lot of reasons to agree with that. But yeah, I'd love to witness that. I think that's one of the more interesting times.
So, what do you think people in 2040 will find funny about 2025 crypto?
Could you believe that there were only 300 some bakers on Tezos? Oof. Wow, to get in on Tezos then. Oh my God. If only I could go back.
Now, would you change anything or would you just watch?
From my own, would I change my own stuff, or going back in time to back then? Well, I'd want to participate in mining Bitcoin.
Talking about like looking forward, all of it, man. Would you change it or would you just enjoy the show as it gets there?
Well, I definitely want to capitalize off of mining Bitcoin when you could do it without even any equipment or even any scripts. Back then it was just a CAPTCHA. Effectively, you could just do addition, multiplication, and then that's how you would mine Bitcoin.
Yep.
Most people don't know that. They don't get how it works. It's like, no, it's just guessing a number. Just faster to do with all these
now, huh?
Yeah. Pretty soon it turned from that to people running scripts that would just guess the numbers quickly, to people adding hardware so they could do that even better. And then it just became about the hardware for the most part. Yeah, but to go back then, and I had a friend who he was at Caltech at the time, and they were very early on mining Bitcoin, and they were solving them by hand. They were solving those mining problems by hand to mine their Bitcoin, because it was faster to do it that way at the time for them. But amazing. Yeah.
Now you've also been a big presence in the community, both locally in LA and through Tezcast. Let's talk about that side of things. You've run Tezos LA since 2018. What's been the most memorable moment from building that community?
Well, COVID really derailed what we were going, but that's why we need to bring it back. I think at that time, I mean, it was interesting seeing all these people come together, because it was the first time I did a Tezos LA type of meeting. Was like, that was the first interaction I had with anything in Tezos. It was like I set it all up remotely, and it's like, wow, these are people who are interested in the thing that I'm interested in. But also I was running around trying to make sure things were organized. But now and I think this is why it's been taking so long to get something going. I'm still trying to think, like, what is the right way to do it? Because now, since like 2021, the Tezos LA community has transformed into something else completely, in that it's expanded because of the art community. At that time, early in the time of Tezos, like before it even mainnet hit, I mean, people were thinking of two things when they thought of Tezos. They thought of this token, and then they thought of this, some of us thought of this governance idea and this global network and all of that. So it was much closer to high concept type things, if you want to include the token as part of that. And then for a couple years, it was the people who thought of Tezos ecosystem and building this blockchain and all of that. And then again, really the people who were just about the token. Like if I said Tezos, they were thinking like, well, what's the price? It's like, what? Oh, you're talking about the token. Oh, well, but they see it from that like point of view as opposed to how we see it, which is that's an extension of one of the things that Tezos is. But then in 2021, Tezos, you had a lot of people identifying with that word, and it means something that means neither of those things to them. To them, it was a rallying call to an art community. It meant something like, this is a kind of art. It's the kind of art that rejects like I think the economic stranglehold they felt before Tezos art came, like the mechanism came to be, because you had to pay really high gas fees on the only alternative at that time, which was Ethereum. And it attracted all these people from all over the world who could not afford to even start or even think about starting on Ethereum NFTs. And then that over time attracted more people like that, and we sort of crystallized in this very I think people early on, they called it the punk rock aspect, which to me I thought of that as too like, oh, that sounds very niche. I don't know if I like, but then I realized no, that's a good thing to be when you're attracting an art community. It's artists, it's countercultural. I mean, of course you want that. What do you want? What's the alternative? You want like the very pop commercial, run of the mill, people get tired of it, like kind of thing. And we've seen how that played out for, I think, a lot of platforms that did chase that. It doesn't, no, you have to keep pushing for the new thing. The place where people come to experiment, the place where, I mean, there's a street cred to Tezos and the name Tezos in the art community. I think that's like nothing else. And that's why we have so many people, even still, even without scaling what people thought would be our biggest bottleneck. And it is our biggest bottleneck from scaling it. And that is the DeFi aspect of the Tezos, where the art lives. But I plan to resolve that. So once we fix that, I think we'll have and we'll get to that, but like the kind of economic effect that would grow both the art scene and commerce in general on Tezos, supporting art or supporting DeFi effectively, but as an effect of DeFi first doing what it needs to do to really support and enrich the art community on Tezos, which I think has been patient for this for a very, very long time. And they deserve that type of economy and those economic aspects.
Now, how has the LA culture compared with the global Tezos scene?
I think LA is a different city from, well, I think a lot of people know from a lot of other cities around the world. There's no city center. People are very remote. You hear a lot about people have to drive a lot in LA. People are very flaky. That's not, Tezos people are reliable. We're not flaky. But that's been a challenge too. It's making sure we get in a place in the city it's so spread out that like we're fair to everybody, that people can come from different sides of the city, not get stuck in traffic. And we're being equitable in that regard. So I think in the past we did stuff in kind of that Midtown Culver City, which has become kind of a default hub for a lot of LA tech stuff over the years, because it's just so central, and probably will continue with that. Mass transit's still very limited in LA, but I think a lot of the remote stuff has happened. And also we've seen Tezos diffuse into, I think, a lot of other blockchain events, and people are seeing Tezos stuff happen, which is a good thing, at NFT events, and art events and all of that, so that it's not siloed to this one particular place. Like you go to the Tezos meetup, no, you go to the blockchain Web3 stuff and Tezos is there. I think that's what really extends the footprint far and wide. So Yep. I would like to have, if people do want to volunteer to help grow that community, it would be great, because we need more people, because I'm doing all this stuff. It can't just be me. We can have much bigger, broader events too if we had more people who wanted to come in and volunteer. So we can get that going. But
are there any lessons you'd share with others running local hubs?
Try to find a way to be consistent with it, and then also make sure that you bring in support from people who are willing and able to volunteer. So but it's been many years since we had an actual Tezos LA event. I think that's the case with a lot of localities, but we got to get back on it. I would say this, to me, the more interesting events that we had in the Tezos world were the ones that we saw out of places you wouldn't expect. And those having seen that shows just how Tezos is a global community, and how Tezos is designed in a way to keep expanding as a global community. And we, like what we saw in sub-Saharan Africa, throughout sub-Saharan Africa. We saw their pictures and videos and everything, and they were so they did a fantastic job. I'd love to see Tezos Africa get sponsorship again, so that we can see from all their localities throughout many different countries throughout sub-Saharan Africa, and the expansion plan that was in the works, that we could see those types of activities again, because I think that exalts Tezos and the image of the Tezos footprint much greater than an event in LA or New York, because you expect those things. Everybody does that. But when you see like things coming out of places you wouldn't expect in sub-Saharan Africa, it's that says something. That's very telling, very implicative. So yeah.
Now, hosting Tezcast, you've been on the other side of the mic. So what's something you've learned about getting good answers out of guests? This one's for me.
But again, it's not like I haven't done that so long. I do have to get, just like with Tezcast, I have to get back to doing Tezos. Just like with Tezos LA, I have to go back to doing Tezcast. I think Spaces is definitely what I've been doing more of than anything else. I think the way I do stuff, it's more conversational. I just have like than anything else. I just go into it, very little preparation, and see where the conversation takes stuff. I think that also helps with, uh, the guests too, because then they're
What
like, oh
was
yeah, I can relax.
what's been your favorite episode so far?
Dude, it's been years since we did the Tezcast thing, so we've only had like 6. So really, my DeFi is the thing that I've been working on the most part. So
All right, so from community to products, you've been building DeFi tools on Tezos for years. Let's dig into what you've learned. Stabletech
uh,
launched DeFi products before Tezos even had the spotlight on DeFi. Looking back, what was the hardest part of being early?
yeah, so we made USDtz. That was the first product we made, and that was in 2020. There were no exchanges on Tezos, nothing that could support it. Uh, Even most wallets wouldn't even display Tezos tokens yet. Block explorers weren't displaying Tezos tokens. We had to go and onboard all the active wallets and explorers at the time. And I think there were only like 1 or 2 that I think just the ones like Galleon was doing it at the time, but like that's because Cryptonomic had deployed USDtz for us, and like so we made little Telegram working groups so that people could get the information about working with FA12 tokens, and also just the trust, because people were coming from a world where the only asset on Tezos that they knew of was XTZ. And that came from a place where they implicitly trusted everything that came for it to be. And I think I think there was more, I think I underestimated like the natural level of inquisition that would come to be. Like, it's like, oh, people are going to welcome the first community token. But then there were people who it's like, you just get one where, you're gonna what is this, a scam? What, get the hell out of here. What the hell? Like, and then the same people are like, why don't we have tokens on Tezos? So I think that was but that was a good thing to get primed in, because I think it definitely inoculated me for things to come afterwards. So that's been an issue. The other issues were over the years. I think some of the successes were definitely once we did launch and get out there, we had a lot of really great organic success with USDtz on the first DEX on Tezos, that people were trading it as much as they would trade any USD stablecoin, that people were doing the spot trading, they were doing the arbitrage, different corridors of, this is important, of markets that emerged, because some people were doing the arbitrage trading, some people were doing the spot trading. Then there were people who were doing sort of the primary market trading, where they would take arbitrage and they'd collect that, and then they would do the minting and redemption, or they would be the people to go to the people to do that. And so there were all these other little economies of people making money in different ways that I didn't necessarily even anticipate all of that, but like it formed its own path through that. And I think that's when we get to, I think, more dynamic steps in like what I've been advocating for more recently, which is L1 bridge tokens and L1 bridged LP tokens, also in particular, bridged over to Etherlink so that we can take advantage of the middleware that would support the incentive programs, as opposed to only having Etherlink as a destination point, a conduit for exports and imports, and not just a destination. So we'll start to see different other kinds of markets as well. That'll be very supportive of that. But yeah, those are the kinds of challenges. And I think there are still people who would be,
Kevin, you mentioned you met a little resistance. Do you feel being early helped you, or do you think it hurt the adoption of USDtz and TezFin?
I think it definitely helped. And I think now, especially, we can look back and say that we've been there since 2020. I mean, how many tokens out there can say they launched May 2020? How many contracts out there are launched May 2020? And we can show, as now we go in, like with the Genie. And by the way, the way we designed it was I decided not to go the algorithmic route, like Uves and Calibri. To me, I thought what was most scalable and what Tezos really needed at the time, and it still does, is a reliable reserve-backed token that would be able to scale without compromise, without charging users in a way, and sometimes without it being a debt derivative aspect. Or asset. Like now but the problem was that the US didn't have any clarity on stablecoins at the time. So we had to do it outside the US and not even allow US participants for a US dollar stablecoin.
That's great.
But we also knew that this was how, like, incorporating that way and getting started that way was a means to advancing to something else later on. So I think part of the struggle was trying to explain, look, there's a difference between the USDtz you see right now and the USDtz you're going to see in the future. And the things that you're not happy with, I'm not happy with them. More than anybody in the world, I'm not happy with them, but we're doing it this way so we can get to that. So the support that we get, it's instrumental in getting it to obviously where we want to be. So I think, and not just in terms of like regulatory compliance, but like the things that go around that, advancing, we have had a very strong security model, but we can always, make it even stronger and give something to impress USDC and Tether and say, hey, maybe we should be like that. Or particularly on Tezos, we should definitely be like that, to lead the way in that regard. And now also, so now we can go into US again because of the Genius Act passing and being signed into law. All these years later, over 5 years of record of USDtz, and now we can finally do what we set out to do. That was contingent on something like the Genius Act being passed. We have a couple new steps to come in, but it'll be greater for Tezos. I think it'll be great for Tezos in the US and business development in the US, particularly in the finance sector. It's great for the Tezos economy because it's a single chain only. So that USDtz assets will circulate in and have a much stronger retention point. It's not the thing you would use for exit liquidity. Other things you might, but this you can have confidence that, this is sort of this is much more lends itself well to a internal circulation than growing the endogenous economy, as well as something broader and overarching to all of stablecoins, which is, hey, diversification of stablecoins is a good thing. It's not, we shouldn't have a monopoly or duopoly, but everybody benefits when this stuff is diversified. The government, gets to avoid having these sort of trust issues in the sense of like it having to have eventual antitrust cases. The people benefit because they get better quality products that are always competing with each other to do better. Financial institutions benefit because they get to have diversified indexes and more instruments to sell. And even the stablecoin issuers themselves, like we benefit because we get to learn from the innovation of a much larger, more diverse industry. So I think that was some of the pushback saying, what does this matter? Don't you see that the Tether and USDC exist? It's like, oh, do they? I had no idea. I thought I was the first one to come up with the idea of a stable. Of course we know that. But the idea here is that like we're creating something that's best for Tezos and doing that in many ways, and also expanding the ideas of what it means to be the best stablecoin for Tezos, and hopefully influencing those other larger stablecoins to take advantage of those ideas as well. So we want to be able to grow and be a reference point for other assets and like assets that would come in and expand into Tezos.
Now, you've always emphasized design and product experience in DeFi. Why was that such a priority for you?
Yeah, I think with TezX more than anything, design and especially the next phase of TezX, that's where I'm really going to be putting my money where my mouth is in that regard, because that's not much more of the consumer product point of view. When it comes to StableTez and USDtz and all that, it's not really a product thing. I mean, the asset itself is the product and people interact with that. But the idea of like, I mean, when was the last time you interacted with Circle's own minting or redemption platform or Tethers? You haven't, because I think only 2 institutions do that for each. Only issuers they have. You get it from the economy itself, and the way that circulates is closer to you. And with Tezfin, I think product is of course very important, but it's also important not to, I think, to definitely expand and iterate in the manner of like, what is the original way in which people get in the door, and focusing on that first user always, before getting on to very different exotic type of assets and features, which just kind of feed the people who are already there, but it just adds to maybe the frictions that new people come in. And we're all of us in Web3. It doesn't matter how big you are as a platform, you are early, and this is a very small market that needs to grow. So you should still always be thinking about like you're a startup dealing with your first users. Yeah. So and taking a tip from Coinbase that they've done very well they're really a design company. I mean, the stuff that they do was always very simple on a functional backend level, but it was the fact that they made something that was inherently overwhelming to people, or on face value overwhelming to people, and saying, look, this is easy and it's the way you imagine in your mind. You put in the money, you get the coin you want, and you can go and see that coin is there. You want to sell it, you can do that too. Boom. And they did it. It was just simplifying something very complicated. So I think that's very important. And also, especially with TezFin and TezX, I don't really ask. I like to go towards like the people who are artists and collectors and saying, does this make sense to you? Does this, is there anything confusing here? Because, we did design the initial model of TezFin to look like Compound or Aave or things that people are already used to, because that's all kind of industry standard. But you have to keep in mind that maybe the market it's not those people. The people you're trying to target, it's not that. So future design iterations will take that into consideration and like more of an artist-friendly entry point, because that's the market of people we have on Tezos. Didn't expect it when we started the TezFin project, but they came to be, and you have to adapt to how the market is, the realities on the ground. So
now let's pivot here. You talk about preparing. You've been preparing for this Genius Act literally for 5 years at this point. Mm-hmm. Do you see these regulations as more tailwind or headwind?
I think it's a first step, but it's definitely one that I'm really happy with. The fact that, for one thing, we have the clarity that it's actually done in a way, and this was what people were worried about. They were worried that it would just insulate the big players now. No, it doesn't. The Genius Act is great for guys like me. It's great for these startup stablecoins, the ones that are wanting to compete in the space, because it gives us a avenue to compete, and it also limits the activities of those that are like Circle and all of that stuff, that if they want to be Genius Act compliant, I think they have another 12, 18 months to adapt. So they got a lot of time. But they can't, the stuff that consumers have been worried about, I think it helps in that regard. But they can't lend money in the way that they collateral in the way that they had been. It has to be towards we all have to use US treasuries. But that actually gives a path of revenue that we haven't taken any kind of revenue at all for StableTez in all these years. We've just been doing everything at cost. So we haven't lent collateral at all. We haven't taken any fees for minting or redemption. We've done that at cost ourselves. It's been very, very conservative, not wanting to affect the track record in any way, because I think that's very important. And when licenses and whatnot come to be, or when we have future additions, I imagine, to the Genius Act and things that would regulators will look back and see, okay, how do we know you'll be a trusted player? How do you operate? It's well, if we've been doing this in good faith, that the Genius Act or something like it would come to be, and we haven't done anything, we've lost money, knowing consciously, we expected to, for this time in preparation for this. I mean, how many others can say that? So I think that's a good thing. And I think but definitely also to the Tezos community that can go and see, look, we are trusted actors. We want to do right by you. We're evolving as a stablecoin, but we're not changing the initial core values of that. This is for the community. And also, I will say, and part of the benefits is that, once we pay off our operational costs for USDtz, what happens to the surplus, that's much more open. So we can actually bring that on chain. We can use that to finance different activities on chain. For one thing, building our own on-chain financial portfolio that can become self-sufficient in itself for a fund, for a DAO, as well as to having grant programs, having maybe our own hackathons, accelerators, maybe having USDtz having its own permanent art collection. The world opens up suddenly in a way that will, like, we can actually have a new financial battery on Tezos that can have its own discretionary financing of things. It doesn't have to be just the ecosystem DAO. It doesn't have to, and support the ecosystem DAO. We can donate to the ecosystem DAO. And it doesn't have to just be Tezos Foundation. It's like, and inspire hopefully other entities to say, hey, you can do that on Tezos too. You could be self-sufficient in funding, and you can finance things, and then have multiple points of influence and even venture capital, growing more entrepreneurship. So that's where I really see a lot of the benefit coming to be for the Tezos community, and people will see that over time. That, as well as different yield opportunities we can draw from that, can concentrate that to the Tezos community and Tezos users, as opposed to thinking about it all everywhere. And also just showing off, like taking advantage of Tezos technical upgrades. That's an important thing. So many things have just they've been developed by core developers, but there just were no entities to really take up the reins and use those technological advancements, things with tickets, things with ZK channels. They weren't really taken up, but we'd be able to do that. We can show that certainly much faster than Circle or Tether would be able to, because we are on Tezos and we want to use it in the best way and make sure we're getting the best out of it for the coin. So, now, all for Tezos.
Lastly, on this regulation stuff, do you think users care about compliance as much as the regulators do?
Not as, I don't think as directly for some. For others who definitely want to do everything by whatever their jurisdiction cares about, which is a lot of people. Just ask anyone who does crypto tax accounting software that there are a lot of people who do that, though that's big business. So they care in that regard. And I think also, especially in the Tezos community, when we get to go around and say, and to different US-based exchanges and custodians, on-ramps, things that they would want to have access to, as effectively marketing and saying, hey, do you want to get onboarded for Tezos? Because we want you to carry USDtz, and therefore Tez, and therefore these other tokens, and therefore supporting US users of the Tezos ecosystem. I think they'll see the benefits in that regard. So it's not just what it does for USDtz, it's what the Genius Act really opens up for Tezos overall, even if it's not direct. I think the greatest impacts will be, a relationship after that, and the many relationships to come. So yeah, a whole new world has opened up because of this, and once we do the next couple things we need to do to get ourselves fully Genius Act compliant, we have time to do it, but we want to hop on this train as soon as we can. I think people will start to see that.
Now, looking ahead, Etherlink and new incentive programs are fueling momentum. How do you see that growth playing out?
I see the mechanisms in place that can be the most powerful vehicle for expansion that we've ever had. I think the fact that we have an EVM conduit that can, for one, do two really important things. For one thing, provide an ability to export our assets from the endogenous economy, from the internal economy of Tezos outward, to create desirability to the outside, to the EVM world, saying, look, there's this cool stuff happening on Tezos. There's this profitable stuff happening on Tezos. I know you don't want to come in because it's not on your MetaMask EVM in the way that you like it. Here's a way you can. Here's a vehicle for that. I think that is so critical. I think that's the first big thing. And then the other thing is the follow through, which is to attract in EVM liquidity and users. But to me though, the coherent way of getting the steps right is to definitely, and I think in the beginning, I'm the last co-organizer of the DCA accelerator, where a lot of this stuff really began, April 2024 in Singapore. Last organizer who's left in the ecosystem, we could talk about this. I think there was a feeling of like, well, we don't want Etherlink to launch empty, and we do need to have some vehicles in place so that other stuff can come in too. I think And yeah, there was a plan at the time to have something like an incentive program, like an Apple Farm and all that stuff. I think we've established that. I think we've succeeded in our ability to establish that essential framework. I think the next step is to now start to encapsulate these desirable aspects of the L1. And one example of a way we've already done that has been with STXTZ, which came from the Uves team. And this is staked XTZ. A lot of people don't know, but things like ST ETH is very popular in the Ethereum EVM world, and there are many composable things you can do with that, and they've been doing with that. It is a very important development. STXTZ in general is a very important development, but the fact that to be able to put it onto Etherlink, and I think campaigns designed around that will show the most interesting results. And it creates so there's a lot of reasons to do it this way. And I would encourage also that we start transitioning the externally, or creating a mechanism for bridged tether that's coming in currently from a layer 0 contract, in which people are bridging from a bunch of different EVM chains over to this one instrument on Etherlink, that we take our native USDT that's kind of been sitting there for a long time, and we start bridging that out. And most people from EVM will still just be able to do it the same way, because they'll be swapping between the pools to get the native asset. It'll be seamless to them, but we'll also create multiple channels of new economies, because you'll have an arbitrage economy for those pools. You'll have people doing interlayer arbitrage between those pools. You'll also have, this is really cool, you'll have EVM people saying, okay, I got this from the pool, but I can get more reward if I could go deeper. Or maybe I want to balance this thing out myself, so to correct on the slippage. Or I guess I could get a greater depth if I go to the L1 and bridge it over. I come this far, let me do that. Once you have them in the door, they're in for a penny, they're in for a pound. Like that's how you get exposure from people from the EVM world to the Tezos world, which fulfills this sort of promise that was set out, which is that this is a stepping stone to Tezos. I think because we don't have that in place yet, and this narrative, well, a couple things. We don't have yet the narrative of a bunch of assets from the L1 going over to the L2. We did actually we do have USDtz on Etherlink now. We did apply for the listing on the bridge, so maybe one day soon you'll be able to bridge that over. But I think interestingly will be the interest-bearing tokens coming from Tezfin, from Upana, that we can wrap and bring over, or even the LP tokens coming from DEXs on Tezos. So it adds an additional layer of abstraction, which makes it stickier. There's more retention in that way. And it creates dual layers of liquidity on both chains.
Where do you see the first big liquidity loops forming?
I think between the more basic aspects of, well, on the endogenous side, without even thinking of Etherlink at this point, because we can export to Etherlink and build up base liquidity that way. I think of Etherlink as also a tool for incentive software for the middleware, as opposed to just being a destination you put in an exchange so you can exchange stuff. It's like, no. Well, we didn't do it on the L1 because we don't have the middleware on the L1. We have the middleware, so just bridge it over, and then you got the middleware. Very easy. So that circumvents the whole problem and uses that for a very great use case. But so I want to see, first of all, I do want to see like for Tezfin and for Upana, the stablecoin, the reserve-backed stablecoin, so Tether and USDtz, to see those interest-bearing tokens bridged and brought over to Ether, or given incentive programs on Etherlink, just so we can build up that, which is a very difficult part to initially build up, the USD liquidity pools. That is the keystone, that is the catalyst, or the lending pools. That is the catalyst to growth of the overall lending platforms, in creating a self-reinforcing loop of those USD pools without having to have incentives, as well as for the very critical credit commerce relationship that I believe will happen between things like Tezos domains, what the semblance of gaming that we have on Tezos, but very much, and it seems strange now for a lot because we haven't had this yet, with the art market. Doesn't require most artists to do it. In fact, not at all. In fact, I imagine very, very few artists and collectors will. It doesn't need that. It starts with just a little bit of it, and even just a few participants is enough to get that recursive loop going between the credit commerce relationship. And it will, whether people know it or not, it will enrich the bottom line of artists and collectors. So I see that as the prime way of doing it. And we have definite examples throughout history of cities throughout the world that once you added where they didn't have much, we've seen this, it was in Paris and Florence, and we saw it in Amsterdam, we saw it in Mexico City, we saw it in Brooklyn. I mean, all over the world where there had been Santa Fe, like they had nothing but fine art. That's it. They had fine art and that was it. And they didn't really have much other exports. But then you brought in like banking and credit where people could borrow capital and use it to buy things like fine art, things like export mechanisms for fine art, all kinds of stuff. And then you started to get a recursive loop between artists and collectors. And that grew that economy enough where they could start taking out capital, like basically renting capital so they could do greater things. And that stimulated the economy for compounding loops of growth. But that led to even more credit coming in. That's what happens. And then that led to more diversification of the economy in general, until ultimately you forget that this whole thing even started with fine art being the prime export, being the prime commercial agent. And it's just, you think of that those became first-class economies, world-class global first-class economies. And so what is it about art that lets you do that? Why are we so blessed with art? Like, could it have been something else in commerce? It's like, well, it can't just be purchasing stuff. It has to, like, or just anything. Like, it wouldn't have worked with the collectibles, like Bored Apes or whatever. It doesn't work like that. Because you need to have a very distributed commerce vehicle. So art is like that because you have a lot of different artists who all have different kinds of art, making different things, and different collectors that like different things. It's an infinite number of tastes and whatnot. And if you lose some people in that regard, you gain others, and it keeps growing or it keeps continuing. And then the product itself, it's not like for you also need something that's of intrinsic value, not something you immediately expect resale or expect resale at all, because once you don't get it, then everybody sours on it, and then it's over. The whole economy is over. But art, for the most, there are people who do resale of art. They do secondary sales, of course, on Object and Teia. But in the end, it's not far away from people who want it for their intrinsic value. They just want it because they want it in their collection, and mostly it's that. So it spans an intrinsic value thing. That's very key. That they want it because they want it. And the fact that it taps into this insatiable hedonic need. People cannot stop. They'll keep buying art for the rest of their lives. It's not like, okay, they got the collection, like that's enough. No, you're going to keep wanting it. The more you see stuff, you're going to want it because there's always new and different. So we're very blessed on Tezos to have really, and I use this word, crystallized a community in that way, stronger than any other community. And people who are part of the Tezos art community, they feel it. They know it. They talk about it. And they even find it challenging to put into words to people who aren't from it. It's like, it's different, and not in a weird kind of like airy-fairy, like you would say this in, like, oh, everybody probably says that about their own thing. Like, no, they'll say they've been to other communities. It's not like this. It's much more transactional. So the level of commitment and like the true sincerity and the way that plays out to the economics is very special in Tezos. The only thing it's been missing has been credit. The one thing they need. And so a lot of the problems of things of support that artists have been needing this whole time, it's the result of a lack of, or indirectly the result of a lack of credit that would enable that kind of growth, that would fulfill the stuff that they need. Bottom line's getting better, and then creating those types of recursive loops. But once we get that in place, I feel that is the thing that triggers the chain reaction. Once we have large enough USD lending pools in Upana and Tezfin, we will see this will be an explosion in a bottle. That's the one thing we're missing. Otherwise, I would say that if we don't do it this way, like, and I think we definitely saw this, of course, with season 1 of Apple Farm, and like when you don't have, and Arthur himself had said this at TezDev, that like he recommends that people like mint on their main token on the L1 and then bridge over, because then, there's a lot of things I think beneficial about that. But one of the things he mentioned is like, well, I mean, you can bridge it over to anywhere. But keep in mind also that if we're looking at other chains, even Ethereum, which has very high latency, like 15-second blocks, way longer than us. And the gas fees are so unpredictable, and they're generally so high. But people still keep minting on the L1, and it's still the preferred DeFi chain. It's still the preferred art, where art is minted and collected. There's sort of a value in the premium of that, which is very, I think, strange maybe for people coming from a core development end who maybe see that initially, but like it's a good thing. I mean, people are really taking this like this very abstract stuff that doesn't exist in, it just exists in the mind really, and taking it as though it is these structures in person. And by the way, if you've seen things like zero contract, which is something else that came out on Tezos, where people are not only minting on the L1, but the idea is to mint the image file within the L1, like itself, as because that has value, because there's sort of a premium to that. That goes to show where the artist mindset really is and where the economic mindset will be. And I think the truest advantage of Etherlink is first, our Tezos DeFi strategy in general is recognizing that, building, understanding we've done everything we need to do on an infrastructural level on the Etherlink side, but to make the best use of it, let's encapsulate these value sources from the L1, which starts with just generating growth of it, and then bringing that over. And then we create a desirability for EVM to come in. They'll still come in for the other stuff. There's still destination aspects and things like Hanji and Superland, which have done a fantastic job. And I was there at their inception back in April 2024. But that it will, you know, it's not like you won't be able to compare it to anyone who does anything rival on other EVM chains, on other EVM L2s out there for that resolve to Ethereum. You will recognize like, no, this is the key to a specific value source that I just can't even get anywhere else. So it'll be able to stand out at that point to really harness the power of Tezos. So that's what I recommend. But yeah, so but also, I will say this: we are going to also launch the first ever DEX pools, our own DEX pools on Tezos. Before we were just aggregating and using pools from, we've done like the liquidity baking dashboard, and we started the path to the aggregation for stable liquidity pool aggregation. But we'll be doing just a couple ones that will be from and we'll be using the Dexter V2, the liquidity baking contract, as the basis of how we'll be building them. So we'll do XTZ USDtz. We'll do the classics you like, I think Tether is one of those. Of course, Sirius will still be a part of it. It's another thing. I think Sirius should have a whole host of abilities to export and bridge over to Etherlink. But I will also, I mean, put it this way, in terms of our own L2 expansion and the platforms we're building, to me, what's most interesting and where I want to take it will be Tezlink. Not Etherlink. I think Tezlink DeFi will really be something that will create a level of really be a game changer for the whole ecosystem and every ecosystem, because it'll be in Mickelson, and Mickelson's better. The smart contracts we can do better, and it's great that the best EVM instance you could ever use is Etherlink, but if you want the best L2, I think it'll be Tezlink. So we want to build there and really see it as an extension of the L1, as Tezos native. And in terms of user experience, to not make it a place that they have to go, we shouldn't even have to think about the idea of migration. Because it's not. Tezlink would be coming to the L1, to coming to your user experience, so that there's this seamless connection. Maybe it'll be a notification. It's like, by the way, we're now using Tezlink. We've extended into Tezlink. So there you go. And you can either dismiss it or be excited about it or whatever, but it shouldn't seem like, this is a new thing, because people otherwise, they have and it's not our fault. It's other chains that have led a bad taste in people's mouths in terms of what L2 means. And it's gotten a bad rap from, I think, many years of other chains on EVM L2s that are made it not so savory of an experience. But not condemning them. It's not in a contemptuous way. It's early for everybody, so they were the pioneers. They got it wrong, so we could do it right.
Love it. Now, you've said your Baha'i faith influences your approach to building. What principle from that worldview do you think blockchain needs most today?
I don't remember saying that, but I do think that, I have been raised. I think definitely people who are curious, because I guess I do have the hashtag in my profile. This is Baha'i. My parents, they came from Iran as Baha'i refugees from Iran, and raised in the Baha'i religion. People might know Rainn Wilson from The Office. He does that too. Hosts a great podcast called Soul Boom. I think it does to the like I try to keep my the values of this faith that I was raised in and everything, as a lot of people do with their own faiths respectively, into making sure that you act in a way that's ultimately better for humanity. If you're thinking about like what's better for me first, and you have a very localized vision, you're not only going to fail what could be best for humanity, but you are going to make terrible products too that people don't like. So if you think in terms of like for me, it's like this has been about like TezFin. It's like this is an equitable system of lending, of borrowing and lending. It circumvents the prejudices that come with the traditional systems that favor elite insiders, and basically making those who are not pay for it. So if we can get to those mechanisms, which we're starting with these things like decentralized lending platforms, I think we can have a much better society that can eliminate the burdens of prejudices and whatnot. But yeah, I'd be curious where you saw that. I don't know if that's a quote from anything I said. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying, like, I guess it's true.
Do you think values-driven design scale in today's DeFi landscape?
I think if it's done right, you won't even notice that it's part of a winning DeFi landscape, that it's just a great product that you're using. I think I think it gets too kind of conflated with impact entrepreneurship, as though there's this extreme. And when people hear that term impact entrepreneurship, they generally think something that doesn't make money, something that's just a charitable kind of project, or something that relies on continuous subsidy to even exist. It's like, well, that's an extreme. Can't you just diffuse those types of like value sets and benefits in a way that maybe is even more sustainable and more innovative, in a manner that is mainstream entrepreneurship? And yeah, it can make a living for you. You can even get rich off it. But it's not going to happen, because you don't make a product to get rich. You make a product that helps a lot of people, and if it happens to work out for you, great. I've done things in the past where I think it helped a lot of people. I think of my first ventures, but it didn't do anything for me. Except I had a good learning experience. So yeah, even though I wanted to. so yeah, I think it's having a value set that I think is in the service of humanity, and how do we leave the world better than when you found it, definitely will make for the best products and services that and that's your actual path towards success, in a legitimate way, in the legitimate world. Yeah.
So when people look back in 20 years, what do you hope they say Kevin Mehrabi contributed?
Jesus, it's like, that's like asking, like, Kevin, how about you say something egotistical right now? What's the most egotistical thing you could think
Right
of
after I set you
it?
up with that last question too. Do you like that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, everything I'm thinking of right now, it's like, don't say that. That's too. He's a good guy. He did well by us.
I respect.
He didn't hurt anybody, and he helped people.
I really.
If I can live with that, then I think that's a good positive karma for me, and hopefully the people around me. But yeah, I just want to keep doing that, and because you have to believe in what you do. It's not, you'll even lose engagement if it's not something that ultimately helps others. And studies will tell you, it's like people will always get, like, the brain lights up more, and you get more of a reward center activation when you do something for someone else more than if you get it for yourself. We do that. We don't always act it that way as humans, but when it does happen, it's true. So it does require us to make a conscious effort to remember that, because we're not always intuitive as and acting on intuition properly as humans.
Now, before we wrap up, let's finish with a lightning round, a few quick fire questions to close things out on a lighter note. All right, are you ready?
Yeah.
First crypto you ever bought?
Bitcoin.
Most underrated Tezos project right now?
Tezfin.
Coffee or tea? What fuels your building sessions?
It's coffee, but I'm going to try to switch to tea.
One book, movie, or podcast you'd recommend to the community?
Oh, I mentioned Soul Boom already. Soul Boom, Rainn Wilson, Dwight from The Office. It's good. Yeah.
If Tezos LA threw a party tomorrow, who's the first person you'd invite to speak?
You, Blangs.
No, I appreciate that, Kevin. Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us and sharing your story. From the early days of Tezos to what's next for Stabletech and stablecoins under new regulations. For everyone watching, you can follow Kevin over on X at @Mehrabi and check out his Tezcast podcast for more conversations around Tezos and DeFi. That's it for this episode of Tez Talks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.